story. But in 8th grade, we had, what do they call it? It was like a day where they give you a list and they say, choose a career, and it's kind of like the game of life, right? So you pick your career, it tells you how much that's going to put you in debt and how much you're going to make when you graduate college. Store, what's it called? It's like something store, life store or something. Anyway, and then you go to the gym and they have all these booths set up and you roll dice to see if you get married or if you have kids or if you're buying a car or if you win the lottery or whatever. Well, the day before we did that reality store, he hands out the list and he says, all right, everybody think about what job you want to have tomorrow, so you get to pick. So I look at this list and I scroll down all the careers and I see the one that makes the most money and requires the least amount of schooling, and that's engineering. And I said, Mr. Duvall, what the hell is engineering? And he goes, well, basically it's like an inventor, only smarter. Like you're less crazy than an inventor because you have a method, but you make things. And I said, and is that a good thing to do? And he's like, well, yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. And I go, Mr. Duvall, if I wanted to be an engineer and I wanted to, maybe stay in Indiana, because I didn't have a ton of money, I was thinking like I need to stay in state to make cheaper educational choices, where would I go? And he goes, well, you've got two choices. You can go to Purdue or you can go to Rose-Hulman. So I went home that night and I said, Mom, listen, this is true, by the way, I'm not making this up, this was true. And I said, listen, Mom, I'm thinking about engineering. And she's like, you're 13, so that's insane. And I'm like, Mom, do you know any engineers? She's like, yeah, I do. She works at Biomedical. She doesn't do anything in science. She works in HR. But she's like, we have engineers. I've known engineers my whole life. They're really smart. They're nerds. And I'm like, perfect. And I was like, do you know anyone who went to Purdue or Rose-Hulman? She goes, actually, I know engineers from both. And I go, okay, well, thinking about going to one of those schools. And she's like, well, Purdue's cheaper, so you should go there. And I'm like, Mom, that's nice, but tell me about, both of them. So she says, well, engineers from Purdue are kind of like this, and engineers from Rose-Hulman are kind of like this, and they're very different because Purdue's a very large public school, just like IU. They have basketball teams that play in championships. Well, not Purdue really. Your classes your freshman year are going to be hundreds of kids, and your teachers aren't going to know your names for the first year or two. Although by the time you get to junior and senior year, you have smaller classes, kind of like this. And at Rose, it's going to be really expensive, and it's a private college, so there's not a lot of federal funding, so you're going to be in a lot of debt when you graduate, because I'm not helping you pay any of it. And but it's going to be more a small environment, kind of like high school. So it's like, okay. So I thought about it for a little, and I went into school the next day, and I was like, Mr. Duvall, I'm going to Rose-Hulman. And he was like, okay, like clearly this girl's crazy, and that will never happen. But when I got to junior year of high school, I found out about a program called Operation Catapult that Rose has, where you can go the summer between your junior and senior year, and it's a 3-week engineering camp. And I said, Mom, send me to this camp. And she was like, I don't know, it's really expensive. And I go, listen, just send me. It'll be great. It'll be worth your money. So she sent me. It was the best time ever, that camp. Just hanging out. You had to engineer stuff, but it was really fun. And at the end of the camp, they give you a piece of paper, and it's pretty much your college application. So I filled out a 1-sheet page. I didn't have to worry about writing letters, recommendation, and essays, and I didn't care about my SAT scores, were just average. And for whatever reason, Rose was like, all right, we'll take you anyway. So usually it's pretty competitive. So I kind of got lucky. By the time I started my senior year, I pretty much knew I was accepted to Rose, so I didn't have to stress out about college the way a lot of people do. But at the same time, I was thinking in my head, like, I chose this career when I was in 8th grade. How likely is it that this is really going to happen for me? So I started thinking about, like, what type of engineering. There's a lot of engineering. The most common is mechanical engineering. I have friends in mechanical engineering who work for Rolls-Royce, Frito-Lay, a lot of manufacturing. Some of them work for Raytheon, which does government work. They build lasers and missiles and helicopters. I think I have one friend that works on helicopters. One of my ex-boyfriends worked on elevators. I mean, if you go into mechanical engineering, you can pretty much pick what you want to build and do that for the rest of your life. Electrical engineering, We think of that as just a slight step up from mechanical engineering. Understanding electricity is a little bit more complicated than understanding gravity. If you do that, again, you get your pick. You can go into almost any industry you want. Chemical engineering has a lot of great fields. There's companies that just design drugs. There's companies that manufacture drugs. You can be in chemical engineering and work for aerospace companies because chemicals are used there. You can work for any food industry you want. There's a lot of chemicals that go into food. So it's pretty much an open door. I chose biomedical engineering, which is a little bit less widespread. It's only been around about 10, 15 years. And we really specialize in things that are going to go into your body. So as a biomedical engineer, you can design like prosthetic arms, skin grafts. I obviously work in pharmaceuticals. There's also biomedical engineers who design like MRI machines, stuff like that. So really with engineering, you have your pick. But the trick is you have to make it through engineering school, which isn't a cakewalk. But anyone can do it. You just have to understand that you have to go to class your freshman year, which I struggled with because I didn't do great freshman year. Skipped a lot of class. Don't do that. Go to college, go to class. Trust me. But looking back, so I chose this degree that cost me a lot of money, guys. I know money is hard to understand in high school. I had 3 jobs in high school and I still didn't get it. But if you're going to go to school, try and get as much credit transferred as possible. I didn't take advantage of the AP classes here. I took AP chemistry. I dropped out halfway through because I was a senior and I just didn't care anymore, whatever. I took AP physics. I got a 2 on the AP test. I took AP calculus and I got a 1 on the AP test. You know what happens? I go to college and they say, hey, your first classes, calculus, physics, chemistry. I was like, oh man. I had to retake. It was the same stuff we learned here, a little bit harder, but I had to retake these classes. Calculus cost me about $15,000 in college. I had to take, we had 3 classes of calculus. I could have tested out 2 of those, so I could have only spent $5,000 if I would have done better on my AP test, if I would have taken high school a little bit more seriously. The only credit I did get to transfer was Spanish. Yes. That saved me a little bit of money. Now, if you go to a state school, it's not going to be quite so expensive. But you can still save yourself some money. And here's the real perk. Then by the time you get to senior year, you're a little ahead in your classes, so you can take 1 or 2 classes your senior year and have a lot of fun. It's important. It's important to have fun in college. That's another thing. A lot of people get freshman year and you meet all these friends and you just want to hang out all the time, but like if you go and join clubs and do like intramural sports and stuff, it makes college so much more enjoyable. And I didn't learn that until about junior year. And then I really got involved, and it was a lot better. Okay, so anyway, enough about college. Go, it's awesome, best time of your life. Don't spend too much on it, and go to class. It's not like high school. I used to sleep a lot in high school. I don't know how I made it in the world, but can't do that in college. Okay, so after college, I graduated in 4 years, and I graduated in 2009. Probably none of you pay attention to the economy, but there's a thing that happened in 2008 where the U.S. economy lost a lot of money. Because of it, nobody wanted to hire anybody. So by the time I graduated, it was very hard to get a job. I have friends who went to IU, were in my same grade, graduated in 2009, who majored in things like marketing, economics. Almost all of them ended up either going into like Teach for America, working at their dad's store, or having to go to grad school because they couldn't get a foot in the door at a real career. They had to do kind of a job after college, which is very hard, especially if you have debt. At Rose, a lot of my friends had jobs, but years prior to that, Rose would gloat about its like 100% placement. All of our seniors get jobs. Nobody has to wait around. Everybody either gets jobs or goes to grad school. But my year was not that way. So I graduated with 23 other people in biomedical engineering, and I was one of 3 at graduation who had a job. So that was very, very unusual, very difficult, but it happens. And we couldn't have known that that was going to happen when I was freshman. It just happened. The reason I had a job when I graduated, not because I had good grades. I was really a C student in college. It's not because I was the smartest, and it's not because, you know, there's a test you take at the end of engineering school called Fundamentals of Engineering. I didn't even take that test. I passed on it, and it's not for me. But I got a job because of two things. One, my personality. Two, because I had internships. I was lucky that my mom worked at Cook. She got me a job when I was 18, so before I even went to college, they have a thing called summer help. So you're not quite an intern, you get paid a little bit less, but it got my foot in the door at a company. And through that, I was able to work at Cook Medical over by Ivy Tech for 2 years, so when I was 18 and 19. Then I worked at Cook Biotech up in West Lafayette when I was 20. I had an internship at Cook Pharmaca when I was 21. So by the time I graduated college, I could sit down in front of an interviewer and say, I have worked at 3 different companies for a total of 12 months in a professional atmosphere. I know how to behave, and I know what it means to have to go to work at 7:30 and be there until 6 at night. And that is what spoke to the hirers. So if there's anything, I know trips to Europe are awesome. Well, I don't, because I've never gone, obviously. I've been working. But get an internship. That is probably the most valuable thing. It's better than getting an A. Take a B in that class if you can get the internship, is what I'm saying. It will help carry you through things, and it'll kind of teach you to behave in a work environment. Okay, so anyway, now to the fun stuff. So I graduated, I got a job as a contractor. So engineers very frequently are labeled contractors. If you're older engineer and you have a lot of experience, they call you a consultant. Basically, that just means you get paid a lot more. I was a contractor at a company, a very small company up in Indy. They have about 30 to 50 employees. And what they would do is they would go to pharmaceutical companies and they would say, hey, we need help validating a system. You need help with some of your paperwork. Here, hire our person. And they would charge, the first place I worked was Lilly. They charged Lilly $75 for every hour I was there, and they'd pay me $25 of it. So it seems like a raw deal, but at the same time, what did I have that most of my peers didn't have? A job. And $25 an hour isn't that bad for graduating college. Would have been better if my college hadn't cost so much, but we made it work. So anyway, I did that for about a year, and they had me at Lilly, and then they brought me down as a contractor at Cook Pharmaca. Well, obviously, living in Bloomington, a lot of people want to get out. You're like, I just want to graduate, I just want to get out of here, I hate it here. I haven't lived in a ton of places, but I'm telling you, Bloomington's not that bad. You'll see if you go away, especially for college, there's some great places out there. Bloomington really isn't that bad. So I decided to move back, and I asked Cook Pharmaca, you know, hey, you want to give me a job so I don't have to be a contractor anymore? And they were like, sure. So now I work there. I've been working there for 3 years. Okay. Any questions so far? Life in college? You can ask me almost anything. Keep it PG. Okay. So, Cook Pharmaca. There are 2 main types, no, we'll go 3. 3 main types of pharmaceutical companies. There's big pharma, Lilly, Merck, Pfizer. Any of these ring a bell? If you ever see a drug ad, at the very end of the drug ad, a little logo will pop up, usually in the bottom. It's the company name that's making it. There's about 20 companies that they consider big pharma. Those companies are very, very large. Global, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of employees, and they do a lot of things. So if you're not really sure, if you get a degree in chemistry, you're not really sure what you want to do, go work for one of those companies, and you can kind of see what all the choices there are, figure out what you want. If you're sure what you want to do, then you can go to a smaller company. The second type is companies that develop drugs. Most of these are based in cities that have universities. Purdue has a lot of very small drug companies because Purdue has a very strong chemistry program and engineering also. There's a lot of small companies up there that they work in a lab environment. They're in their lab coats, and these guys are designing, developing, and discovering drugs on a daily basis. They usually partner with other companies that will do clinical research for them. So like if I develop a drug and I say, hey, I think this is really great, it's going to work, they're going to say, great, we're going to go stick it in an animal and see what happens. Yeah. And they'll do that. If the result's okay, say, okay, we're going to give you a phase 1 clinic. So you file with the FDA and you say, hey, I want to put this in people. The FDA will read through all your documents and they'll say, yeah, it seems safe. And they'll get some people together who, if it's a therapeutic drug, which just means something that's going to cure a disease you have or treat a disease you have, they'll find people who have that disease that they think, it's called a, I always forget this word. Never mind. Basically what they think the drug is going to target. An indication, that's what they call it. So if I say, hey, I made this drug and I'm pretty sure it has really strong indications for pulmonary fibrosis, so do you have any patients with lung cancer I can put it in? And they'll get the patients to say, yeah, I'm on my last limb, please give me this drug, maybe it'll help save me. That's phase 1 clinical. And if the drug works, you go to phase 2, which is pretty much the same thing, but they'll open it up to a lot more people. Most of the clients that I'm working with right now have a lot of drugs in phase 2. Phase 2 is pretty much the last step before the FDA says, yeah, okay, let's go. There is a phase 3. Phase 3 is kind of like, it's a very broad audience, but it's pretty much, we know the drug's going to work, and we know it's going to work for this specific thing, so we feel okay giving it to a large group of people. And if you pass your phase 3 clinical studies, you get commercial, which basically means now you can make money on your drug. So until that point, a company is not making any money, and I'm talking that's like a good 5 to 12 year process. So if you discover a drug in the lab and you're like so excited about what it's going to do for patients, you better be ready to commit at least 10 years to working on this drug if you want to see it really like sold and helping a lot of people. But it happens. And this is something that the government's talking a lot about, like we need to get drugs to people faster, then the FDA is like it's not safe. Very controversial. That's what the lobbyists are for.
That's the part of the problem with marijuana.
That is part of the problem. So anyway, what I do, the third type, I make the drugs. I don't discover drugs. I don't know a lot about chemistry. There are people at my company who do. But we don't, at Cook Pharmica, discover new drugs. What we do is we make your drugs. So you go out, you discover a drug, you get it through your phase 1 clinical, and you come to me and you say, I need 20 million of these. And I go, all right, I'll give it to you in 6 months. All right, so I'm going to show you a video. How do you turn the projector on?
Yeah.
And it's locked also.
Oh.
But you can just pull up that video I tried. All right, so how do drugs get delivered to patients? Yeah, who's ever gotten a shot before? All right. So, if you're in a doctor's office and they're giving you a shot, that drug has been commercially approved. Congratulations. It will come pre-assembled. It'll have its own little box with a label, and it's got a needle in it, and it's great and beautiful. That's awesome. We don't have the money to spend on all that extra packaging for non-commercial products. So, if you have a drug that's in a clinical use, it will most likely come in a vial. Now, it can be a liquid or a powder. I'll get to that in a minute. Or it can come in a syringe, but it's going to look like this, where it doesn't have a needle on it. The doctor will have to screw in a needle. And it will have like a plunger, like you're used to seeing. Sometimes they have to screw those in themselves too. It's a little bit less money for me to make something like this or something like this than one that's like beautiful and packaged. So this video is of, we call it the vial line. Ooh. Basically, it is a very expensive, I think it was like $10 million thing that we bought from Germany. It's taken us 5 years to get it to the state it is at now. And we have one commercial drug that we make on it. Hopefully soon will be more. But in the meantime, we make a lot of clinical drugs. And this is just kind of a video of how the machine runs. It's really fascinating. Do you want me to turn the light off? So I think there's words.
The viewing quarters of Cook Pharmica's vial line give you a front row seat for viewing the entire filling process. The equipment and processes provide the benefits of best-in-class standards and yet are customizable, allowing for manufacturing flexibility. Filling, row-by-row loading and unloading for lyophilization, and capping all take place under barrier isolation, with the capability of filling 60 to 150 vials per minute depending on vial size and fill volume. The completely automated process starts by using an inline style vial washer. Ranging from 2 to 20 milliliters up to 50 milliliters with change parts, the interior and exterior are washed and prepared for depyrogenation. The changeover for the vial washer can be completed in less than 15 minutes. It is all part of our turnkey approach that combines precision and efficiency. Upon leaving the washer, the vials enter the depyrogenation tunnel, which is equipped with a sterilizable cool zone. The depyrogenation tunnel feeds vials onto a turntable, staging them to go from continuous motion to the walking beam intermittent motion. The vials are then fed into a 4-headed filler, which is capable of running up to 150 vials per minute using a time pressure filling mechanism and incorporating 100% non-destructive fill weight checks. A nitrogen overlay can also be provided before, during, or after filling for oxygen-sensitive products. With the ability to handle ready-to-use or ready-to-sterilize components, sterilized stoppers are charged through a rapid transfer port, and vials are stoppered for either liquid or lyo formats. For freeze-dried products, the vials enter the 250-square-foot lyophilizer, using an automated loading and unloading system that feeds vials row by row. The lyophilizer can hold 120,000 2-milliliter vials, or approximately 30,000 20-milliliter vials. During unloading, the bidirectional conveyor reverses direction to take stoppered lyo vials to the capper and tray loader. Sterile caps are charged through a rapid transfer port and are crimped using a rotary-style crimping wheel with adjustable head pressure and spin speed. The capping operations are all performed under barrier isolation. During tray loading, vials are identified with UV-excitable barcodes or human-readable inkjet screening on the caps. The vials are also counted as they are loaded into the trays.
All right. So yeah, that machine's about 100 yards maybe from my desk. See it every day. I know a lot about it. And we also have one for syringes, which I might show the video for, but it's kind of more. So you can check these out. These are empty vials. Sorry. We don't. And basically, it's got the glass vial, and then inside of that is a rubber stopper, and then a little aluminum cap. So these are some of the stoppers and caps outside of the vial, so you can see what they're like. This is before the cap gets crimped down.
Let's try to open them.
I prefer if you don't. I'll probably open one so you can see it. So these are little components. These are obviously different size. So for a vial, there's 3 main things that I have to get to happen. So a client will come to me and they'll say, hey, we have a drug and we want it in a 10 ml vial like this. So I'm going to put maybe like 8 milliliters of drug in here. And they'll say, we're going to ship our drug to you already made, and I just need you to make me a couple 100,000 of these. And I'll say, all right, so this is my job, this is what I do. And I'll say, great, okay, so I'll ask them a lot of questions about their drug. Is it safe? How much are you going to send me? What's it coming in? A tank. Sometimes now we use disposable technology. It's a really big thing in pharma. They'll send it to me in a bag, which just sounds crazy, but like millions of dollars of liquid in a bag, and I'm like responsible for it. It's terrifying some days. But I'll hook it up to one of these machines. All the equipment that's going to touch the drug has been cleaned and sterilized. And then I have a great team of people that is going to run the machine, and it's going to pump in. There were like the 4 needles that were filling drug into each vial. So each vial will be empty. No, cappers. The machine's going to get a weight of every single empty vial. Comes forward, it's going to put drug into it. There's a valve that opens the line, and it knows exactly how many milliseconds to open that piece of tubing for the correct amount of drug to come in. It'll do 4 at a time, and then the vial will go on to another weigh station where it'll get an after. So it knows exactly how much this exact vial weighs before it has drug in it and how much it weighs after, and the machine will tell you if it's good or bad. If it's good, it keeps going. If it's bad, it'll kick it out.
So sig figs really matter?
Sig figs matter so much. We do the vial line to the thousandth place, so it'll fill, like if I tell the machine I want 5.402 milliliters, that's how much it'll give me. I do get an allowable tolerance, usually plus or minus 2%. The syringe line actually goes down to the 10,000, because these usually fill a lot less than 2, so it has to be very, very, very precise. Rounding is something I have to deal with almost every day. Rounding errors when people don't round correctly is fun in my job. But anyway, so then any vials that are filled with the right amount, they have, I think it's like a minute that it's allowed to sit with drug without a stopper before the machine's going to reject it. Because even though it's inside this like glass contained environment that's completely sterile, you still only have so much time to get a stopper on it before it's considered bad. So the stoppering machine will do 4 at a time also, and it'll stick the stopper on, and then there's a sensor that'll make sure the height of the stopper is correct, and then it'll go on to the capper, where it'll get like that red cap put on, and then it crimps it, which is how it gets it nice and pretty and sealed. And then if the client has asked for it, we'll print a lot number on the side. We can also do an invisible UV lot number on the top, so that way they have identity. Some clients don't want anything printed on it, which is very hard for me, because then if I find a tray of vials somewhere that doesn't have any identity, I don't know what it is, and it's a problem. Although that doesn't happen because we have quality systems to make sure that doesn't happen. But anyway, so if it's liquid, then you're done. They get counted, they get sent to another group, another team called inspection. They take every single vial and every single syringe, 100%, and they look at the product and they look at the stopper. They're supposed to do about 4 a minute. They check for scratches on the glass. They check to make sure everything was sealed correctly. They see if there's any particles, anything like that shouldn't be in there, that got in there. I think one time we found a hair, which how, I don't know, because everything's like contained. And but every single drug that comes out of our facility gets manually inspected by a person. Right now we do have a machine that's going to start doing syringes eventually. But right now it's all manually inspected, which is very, very expensive. They check, make sure it looks good. They say it passes. If they inspect like 10,000 vials, our quality team will come in. They'll pick 200 randomly to inspect themselves, and we'll make sure those 200 pass. It's called an AQL, acceptance quality limit. And as soon as that's done, the batch is considered good, and we close up the documentation, which only takes like 30 days, and then we ship the drug out. So the purpose of this cap is for tamper evidence. So when you get this drug, if you're a physician, you get this drug, you know no one has tampered with it, because this cap is protecting you. As soon as you pop this cap off, it's now, you can't put it back on. It doesn't go. So that's how they know that your drugs are safe, and they came straight from me, and they haven't been tampered with. Most caps are meant for a syringe to get stuck in it. They'll pull the liquid out, and then they'll either inject it subcutaneous or they'll stick it into an IV bag. These are a very special client that I deal with, where we lyophilize, so we turn their liquid into a powder by freeze drying it. And so their one actually comes with a little flip tear seal. So for this drug, the physician would actually go ahead and tear this aluminum seal off, very sharp, and then they can eventually get to the powder and just pour it straight on. So that's kind of how the drugs are delivered.
So you have to actually put the powder in another container in order to turn it back into a liquid?
Most lyophilized, that's a great question. So most drugs that we freeze dry will get reconstituted with saline, like in the operating room or in the hospital, in the clinic. This specific one is actually it goes straight onto a wound. So sometimes they go as a powder. Why would we choose, try and do some critical thinking, why would we choose to take a drug that's a liquid and put it into a powder if we're just going to put it into a liquid again? Shelf life, exactly. As a liquid, a lot of the proteins in this drug can degrade. But if we get it into a powder form, we take all the, basically we're just sucking all the water out of there, it will keep the shelf life like 3 times more. So then you can, ship things to China and they can take forever to get to the patient and it'll still be okay. So syringes, when we buy syringes empty, vials come just pretty much like this. You see the stoppers and the caps are loose and the vials were loose. Syringes come in what's called a tub. This is a 10 by 10, so it's 100 syringes in here. They also come in 10 by 100 or 10 by 16, 160. And then this is called a nest. So these are nested syringes. They're all loose. If I drop this, it would be a disaster. And what the machine pretty much does is this will be covered. It'll have 2 lids and bagging around it. We'll buy them sterile. They'll go into the machine. I guess I'll probably just show you the video. But anyway, the point is these get filled a lot differently than the vials. I wanted to bring this in for visuals so you can kind of see. Another thing to notice on both the syringes and the vials is that they're glass. Can you kind of feel that? They feel like glass. There's been a big push lately to move to plastic. Anyone know why we would want to move away from glass into plastic?
Less breakable.
Yeah, breakable. It's cheaper.
It doesn't make really sharp shards, but it does break.
So some of the drugs I fill, especially, how I told you, by the time a drug gets to commercial, it can be 12 years. Think about the money it costs a company to have a group of very smart scientists and engineers developing a drug for 12 years, not to mention all the materials that go into it. It costs a lot of money. So by the time you get to like a phase 2 clinic, 1 vial of your drug can be like thousands of dollars of investment for you. If someone drops that, it's very, very sad if it's in glass. If it's in plastic, it doesn't really matter. As long as the cap and seal are still intact, it's still sterile. But if it's in glass, it's going to shatter and you're out a couple grand. It really sucks. Sometimes I have to remind the people manufacturing how much some of these drugs cost, because they'll kind of be a little, loose. And I'm like, hey, that was your money. In my job, I'm the one that works directly with the client, so they get to remind me how much their drugs cost, so I get to remind manufacturing how much the drugs cost, so we all remember to be very careful and safe. Even on really, really big batches, every single one counts. At the end of every batch, I have to do a yield calculation. So if I say, all right, you gave me 100 liters of your drug, what did I give you in return? Well, if it's 1 milliliter per vial, they're hoping for 100,000 vials. Right? Yeah. Normally, I can't give them 100,000 vials. There's going to be losses along the way, but I'll promise them like a 90% yield, depending on the batch size. If it's that big of a batch, I'll give them a 95% yield, and then I better be able to meet my target. So for me, it's really important that we do a good job in manufacturing, otherwise the clients get mad at me.
If you don't meet your target, do they have to send you more drug and you have to put that in more?
No, depending on the contract. We have a contract with every single client. Most of the contracts we say we can't guarantee a yield, this is what we'll shoot for. If there's a client that's really, really mean and they're like, if you don't meet this yield, there's a consequence, it just means that we have to give them a break on the cost, which sucks for us because it costs us the same whether we meet the yield or not. That's just part of doing business. So, with my last couple minutes, I want to talk about what's it called? So there's 2 main types of drugs, APIs, and I always forget the word. I always want to say biosimilars, but that's like not quite it. So there's the type of drugs that come from chemicals. A lot of chemotherapy drugs are straight active pharmaceutical ingredients, we call it. It's a chemical. It's from elements they've combined and made a great chemical that'll do stuff for you. The other type of drug is what's really big right now, protein. They all come from proteins. So basically, at Cook Pharmica, we do this also. It's not on my side of the company, but they will design a protein in a lab that will target a specific disease. So it's a therapeutic or an antibody sometimes. And what we'll do is we'll take a Chinese hamster ovary cell, take a couple of them.
Specifically a Chinese.
Specifically a Chinese hamster ovary cell. Seriously. We'll take like literally the amount that would fit in this. And we will make them so happy. It is like the best home they've ever had. We will grow them and have them multiply until we have a huge vat. I'm talking like
The cells, not the hamsters.
the cells, not the hamsters.
A vat of hamsters.
So I'll have a big vat of like 2,000 liters of cells. And then I will take this antibody that I've very carefully developed in lab, years of work, and I'll inject it into this tub. And all these cells that are in this very sensitive state, they're going to eat this antibody, and it is going to tell them specifically to make a protein. So now every single cell in there is kind of like a worker bee, and it is working to make the specific protein that I have asked it to make. And when all of the cells have made that protein, I will shock the system. And by doing that, all of the cells are going to secrete the protein. It's part of the cell's like mechanic, to try and stay alive. They kind of like try and get small and like shrivel up so that they can stay alive because I'm putting like acid or something into their food. And in doing that, they're going to secrete. They're going to poop out this protein. All right. That's what I want. That's the drug. That's the good stuff. That protein that they just poop. I know. It's very scientific. So I'm going to filter now, and I'm going to throw all these cells away. Thanks for working with us. Bye. Right down the drain. And I'm going to keep all this protein. So I went from a very tiny amount of cells to a very big vat of cells. I made them secrete all these proteins, and now I'm concentrating it back down. Those proteins are ultimately what is in your drug. That is what we design the proteins to be, to go into your body and target exactly what's wrong with you. So if you go into chemical engineering, chemistry, biochemistry specifically, that is the type of work that they do. It's very neat. It's way over my head. Super hard to understand. You got the dumbed down version. That's about all I can get. I didn't study that. All right, questions? Yes?
From what I've heard from a lot of engineers that work in cooking and such is that getting, because biomedical engineering is such a new field, sometimes it's a little bit better to get a degree in another area, and then if you're going to do graduate work, get into biomedical engineering. Do you feel like there's another major that's fairly similar to biomedical?
Yes. Mechanical engineering is the most similar. I basically took mechanical engineering classes for 2 years, and then I diverged into biomedical classes. The difference is, when I was a senior, I was taking high-level biology classes, physiology. I was learning a lot about the body. My favorite class was human tissue, like biomaterial and tissue interactions, I think it was called. Basically, like, if I take this piece of aluminum and stick it in my skin, what is my body going to do about it? It was a great class. Mechanical engineers aren't going to get that type of biology in their senior level classes. They're going to be taking like high level kinetics, and they're going to still be learning about the stuff that really bores me to tears. But I don't think, when I went on job interviews and they said, we posted for a mechanical engineer and you're not that, I would explain to them, I took mechanical engineering for 2 years. I learned all the basics. I just know a little bit more about the body, and if you're going into a field which involves human bodies, which guess what? Every field. Car companies, they need to know how the lumbar system works to design a seat back. I just think biomedical engineering, you can't go wrong because everyone cares about humans and how they work, and to know that on top of some of the mechanical engineering stuff is really valuable. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so what I'm planning on doing in college is not focusing on science. I think I'm going to major in chemistry, but I'm also going to major in something like classical languages or something like that. And so I've had multiple teachers tell me I should think about engineering, but one of the ideas I've gotten is that maybe I should look at that sort of thing in grad school. Do you have friends that have done that sort of thing? And how would that work?
My only friends who have gone to grad school for engineering all did undergrad in engineering. It is hard. Grad school in engineering is like, I remember one of my friends showing me stuff. I didn't understand it. It's hard. So if you think you want to do engineering, undergrad's really easier, but then you could get an undergraduate in engineering and do a graduate school in chemistry. Much easier. Much, much easier.
Because I'm actually only really looking at two schools, well, one school not counting IU that has engineering. And that's probably not something I'm going to take.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We'll have to see.